During this presentation, around the world, patients and healthcare professionals will be turning to the internet and exchanging questions for health advice over 10 million times. We're going to be discussing the AI disruptions to that search for answers online and consider the implications for the digital information experience in healthcare and think about the role that we can all play in shaping the future digital landscape in the way that people get advice on their health. Who in the audience has already turned to ChatGPT for health advice? And hello everyone online as well, feel free to put your hand up. Has anyone actually sought the answer to a health question online with any of these tools? Nobody. Okay, a couple of hands. It's okay, you can admit this because I've done it and it's an absolutely wonderful experience. So it's important to consider through the lens, like go through the looking glass and through the lens of our healthcare stakeholders, what this experience is going to look like for them. I'm Julia Walsh, I'm a search listening specialist and author of What We Really Ask Dr. Google. I'm absolutely honoured to be a senior fellow at HITLAB, and my methodology in search listening health was recognised by Reuters as a top trend in patient engagement, and I'm founder and CEO of Brand Medicine International. When ChatGPT launched, a lot of the hype was around content development and saving time. What it immediately flagged to me was the potential for adopting it as a search tool. And so I convened a group of senior pharmaceutical executives to unpack what the implications for this meant. I mean, we had a double exponential curve of uptake and transformation in this space, so it felt like there was quite an urgency to find a way to develop a roadmap for how do we respond to these AI disruptions in search, particularly in healthcare where evidence is key and time is really, really critical for a lot of patients. As you all probably know, patients ask questions at every single point of the patient journey. What's more important to consider is how they feel when they ask these questions. We see evidence of the stages of grief through the questions that people ask, such as, can newly diagnosed diabetes be reversed? Or, when they start talking about a disease that they've had a long time, they start referring to it as my high blood pressure or my cancer. So considering the way they feel has a lot of implications with regards to these chat tools. Beyond the questions themselves, we want to map the entire digital information experience and understand what is actually turning up for them on page one. Is it actually answering the questions that they have, or is there a complete digital disconnect, as I see a lot of the time? The reason why it matters is because the health advice that people take the time to seek online informs their opinions, which drives their behaviour. When you ladder that up to take into account, there's over 1 billion health-related questions asked into Google alone every single day around the world. This has a profound impact on quality use of medicines, public health outcomes, and the healthcare ecosystem as a whole. So our team wanted to understand, for all of the questions on a given topic, what are the websites that are actually turning up? So when Google says there's 3,750,000 results, what we wanted to know is who's actually turning up on page one and answering these questions. So we developed a capability for real-world digital share of voice measurement, and this reveals the publishers that are really driving the narrative on a particular topic. Outside of the US, in most markets, there are restrictions that pharmaceutical companies are not allowed to have a voice online directly to end user stakeholders. What this means is that sites like drugs.com that prioritize the contributions of people with no health credentials, N of 1 patients, over the clinical evidence, or what they call vested interests. So in this example where we've got over 1 million questions asked every year in Australia, even though we've got a very small population, on this particular prescription medication, WebMD and drugs.com are the ones turning up and guiding answers to how, what dose do I use in a patient with a DVT. Enter AI. So this artificial intelligence responses that are now being incorporated into search engines, they basically scrape answers from what's prominent on the visible web. So if a lot of the content around prescription medications or medicines, in any form, whether they're digital or other, sit behind firewalls, this is going to create a problem, as illustrated by this analogy. And doctors Google too, all the time. We see, people think that they don't, but they do. We see all kinds of questions. In this particular question where they're seeking guidance on a prescribing decision, we can see that drugs.com is the top reference that has been sourced for this answer. Moreover, the answer actually leads with a focus on adverse events, including very alarming things called kidney damage and death. So I think what's happening is that we're getting this filtering of the content that's prominent on the web into these AI tools, and it's totally missing from the picture what happens if you don't treat this patient with uncontrolled hypercholesterolemia. That's probably more dangerous, to be honest. So Bill mentioned about the hallucinations. I think a great example is this query seeking a PubMed reference for the support of ivermectin in treating COVID. Controversial, I know. Very confidently, this response is delivered back with a PubMed ID. So if we follow that through and we actually check that ID to see if we can verify it, and there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that will not take this extra step, we can actually look up the PubMed ID and we find that this study that's presented has absolutely nothing to do with ivermectin and nothing to do with COVID. So this presents definitely a potential problem. In our white paper that we recently published, and I've got copies of it at the back, we actually did a comparison to seek specific references to support the state of cancer research in Australia. Out of ChatGPT 3.5, ChatGPT 4 and Bard, we found all of the references in red are invalid. That's a lot of very credible looking references, but they don't exist. At least we have a legal precedent now for not using and not relying on these references, if you all remember that recent case. So just going back to the way patients feel about how they ask questions about their health online, when they're grabbing their phone at 3 o'clock in the morning because they're catastrophizing about a diagnosis. Who has actually thanked Siri? Yeah, I've done it. You ask a voice to text and it says message sent and you're driving along, you go, thank you. So this leaning towards personalizing that interaction with artificial intelligence is it's innate in us. And we've seen evidence as well where chatbots were measured to outperform physicians on both quality and empathy ratings. So this has profound considerations for the interactions with these chat tools for health advice, particularly when we think about the way people feel. This is a great example of a prompt that someone would say, I've hurt my knee, what should I do? People don't turn to the internet and enter a URL. They start with their natural language. We have all loved the ranked menu of websites that Google has given us. I mean, we've used this for many, many years and we all rely on it. When you transfer that same question into the artificial intelligence chatbots that have been incorporated into the search engines, we see empathy infused into the response. I'm so sorry to hear that. And then some very beautifully succinct, consolidated advice that's gone from taking all of the messy ranked websites that someone would have had to navigate around and plop them all together in a nice answer and then say, I hope this helps you feel better soon. So we can understand why people are gravitating across to this as a search tool for health advice, but reflecting back on the kind of references used, we can see that we're probably going to go backward before we go forward in terms of the influence of this exchange of information that's happening online and the impact it's going to have on the healthcare ecosystem. It seems that potentially in the race to be first to own the chat-based search market, I worry that the patient is being forgotten. And it might be like one reaction to think, well, we'll just tell everyone not to Google it or not to use these tools for health advice. We've said that for years and nobody listens. So we need to actually lean into this exchange and accept that Dr. Google or these new tools are an ever-present virtual member of every multidisciplinary team, and know that this relationship is only going to deepen with AI chat tools. In our summit workshop, we identified, of course, there are going to be many challenges that we need to face, but there are opportunities as well. First of all, the consideration for bringing that virtual consultation with that digital member of the healthcare team out of the blind spot and into the spotlight, and incorporate that into a hybrid healthcare consultation. This allows doctors to quickly scan all of the knowledge available on the World Wide Web and integrate that into the advice that they give to that patient, and concurrently discredit misinformation in real time. So there is a really big opportunity for that. From a government, payers and providers point of view, there's concern about how can we effectively regulate what we don't yet fully understand, and it's changing so fast. That certainly represents a critical challenge. But we want to respond, not react, and that was the advice of the people that sat at the round table with me. We came up with a number of considerations for government and payers. All of this is published in the white paper, which you can download later. Promoting patient engagement in their health journey and recognising this as a significant channel of influence. I feel like it's been in a blind spot for a long time in pharma, and now we need to actually take a leap and accept it, but also now catch up. We can absolutely lean on this adopted behaviour and harness the digitalisation of health advice. And this can also, of course, enhance health equity and access for people who challenge to pay for healthcare, but also challenge to access it. Directly engaging with search engine companies, like why can't we? We should definitely have a seat at the table with them and say, if you're providing advice about a prescription medication, you need to attach the product information and the consumer medical information as one of those references that's relevant to the local market in which that question was asked. Partnering with international agencies like the WHO or ICMRA is another way to make sure that we're dealing with a situation that actually has no borders. We're thinking globally and acting locally. There's importance as well to implement ethical guardrails around privacy and misinformation. And finally, ensuring there's accountability for poor quality health advice, because currently that can be served and no one's accountable, and it definitely has costs and consequences. We have an opportunity with the transformation of the digital landscape to make sure that reliable health advice is available at everyone's fingertips, and those who are proactive have the chance to shape global policy. From an industry perspective, we identified some critical success factors as well for C-suite: knowing, accepting and embracing this disruption, encouraging staff to play with the tools and learn about the changes and consider how health advice is being exchanged and delivered online, facilitating and rewarding cross-functional teams that include IT. We had a great IT representative at our roundtable, and she said, we can do so much more than help you when you forget your password. Establishing reverse mentorships as well was another great idea that came up, where we harness the value that's added by our digital natives, as well as those who are very senior, who have great understanding of the healthcare environment, and partnering them together to teach each other and navigate through this new landscape. Accepting that this is something we need to find funds to pay for and allocating budget towards it. And also finally, creating a culture where it's safe to fail. Because there are going to be failures as people try and adapt to this. So are we, faced with a situation where robots are now taking control of the way that health advice is being delivered online? I don't think so. I think we're at a point where we can actually step up, and many small acts of digital activism can help to clean up the internet for patients and create a change at this point in history that's going to be very positive. And if you think that you're too small to make a difference, then you've obviously never slept in a room with one mosquito. So finally, I really believe, and I know that we all do, that patients deserve health advice that is locally relevant, intuitive to understand, searchable, true, based on the clinical evidence, not N of one, empathetic, which these chatbots are definitely doing really well, and new. I still see content on page one that's over 10 years out of date. Blows my mind. So there's a lot of opportunities to really improve this experience online. The white paper is available for downloading. I was very, very fortunate that we had an incredible group of contributors to the publication of this. And for more information, feel free to follow Brand Medicine and find me later in the session. Thank you.